The new left, the Mamdani type of people, they've moved on from the racial stuff. I noticed they don't play that game anymore. They're talking about economic inequality, which I think is a real issue in both our countries. But I wanted to ask you about Mamdani because it looks like he's going to be the mayor of New York.
Which is insane.
And you're a former police officer, and this is a guy who is on record over and over and over saying defund the police. First of all, before you give your opinion about that, what would happen in America if you defund the police? If you actually don't have as many police officers?
Yeah, we'll turn into a third world country. I mean, almost, I don't know, give it 6 months. If you, well, let's talk about defunding the police, because the politicians say things that are not real. Like, they use defunding. There's two sides of it. There's the rhetoric of defunding the police, and there's actually defunding the police. A lot of times they use the rhetoric, but they never really defund the police because it's fiscal year funding, right? So they go, we're going to defund the police, we're going to defund the police, but the police funding already exists. So they tell people that to get them to vote for them, and then in reality, they never really defund the police. But then there's people who actually do defund the police, which, and they lie about statistical data points. Because when you defund the police, therefore you have less police out, less arrests are happening. Therefore the crime has gone down. Wait a minute. That's not really what's happening. It's just that you don't have enough police to actually stop people from robbing other people. And when the people have lost trust that they can't call the police and get a real response, they quit calling. That don't mean that they stop getting robbed. That don't mean that people aren't breaking in their cars. That don't mean that sexual assault is not happening. That don't mean that shots are not being fired in the middle of the street. It's just that they're not reporting because they're not responding anymore. When you defund the police, you demoralize the police. Because the rhetoric is demoralization, even before you actually take the money. When you show the police department, men and women that go out and put their life online every single day, putting their goals, aspirations, lifestyle, family aside to protect people who are perfect strangers. When your city say they don't really care about your service, it becomes demoralizing. Then cops are saying, well, they don't care about me, so I'm not gonna go over up and beyond to do my job. I'm just gonna answer the call when they call. Because in America, there's a thing called proactive policing, which is the biggest proponent of successful policing that exists, is proactively policing. That means that before a person calls after they've gotten robbed or raped or something, you are out patrolling and looking and identifying things that could be an issue, stopping out with people that are suspicious, and then you find out that that person is wanted for murder. You know, like that proactive side. So when they say they're gonna defund you, the morality drops, cops stop doing their job, and you know, as far as they begin to do the bare minimum. Then you have people that don't want to apply for the police department. So you're left with two things when it comes to that category, is that good cops don't show up. The bad people who just want a job or they got power trips, they show up to the job. So now you've influxed bad cops into the scenario, and good cops don't want to join, and good cops with veteran experience begin to retire early. That's before you ever take the money. Then when you get to the point where you're starting to take the money, you are now depleted and you cannot recruit. And so you have cops that are disgruntled, waiting to retire, cops that don't want to work. Then you cut the resources back from policing, so it's less cops. Then you can't recruit any cops, so it's even less cops. Then the public is now running amok. People are committing way more crimes. And then they want to refund the police, but you have no police because you've lost trust. So that whole scenario is so detrimental to the success of policing in America that some places never recover. Some places will never recover. They will never have adequate law enforcement, because you cannot have a Mamdani say all the things that he said, lose the trust from NYPD, and then all of a sudden he say, no, I want to start recruiting again. And they don't believe you. You're not going to really be, you're a politician running your mouth. You're not really going to do anything for us. So if, in fact, all of the cities who are saying these things actually defunded the police, we wouldn't have a country anymore. And I think people don't understand that. And one reason is because they don't know what cops do on a day-to-day basis. Thwarting the people before they kill you is something that police do actively. Arresting people and putting them in jail, people who would commit habitual crimes, is something that they do. The barking dog call, the disturbance call, neighbors having conflict that will lead to violence if there's no intervention. Mentally ill people in this country running around everywhere we go. We were just driving over here and a guy sticking his middle finger up at, I don't know, ghosts. That guy's mentally ill. And the public is not equipped to deal with a person like that one-to-one, right? Meaning you go to the bus stop and this guy's crazy. What do? Then he stab and kill you, right? Versus a cop will pull over and check on him and be able to take him to a facility if necessary. So, you know, we're in a bad precedent if we begin to have Mamdanis leading these cities, because it's not based on reality, it's based on a virtue signal. It's based on saying, hey, people, constituents, let me play on your emotion, your victimhood. You are being mistreated by police. They're racist. Yeah, we're gonna defund them. We're gonna bring public servants, or not public servants, we're gonna bring civilians in to take over these things where police are too aggressive. Yeah, that makes sense. And they weaponize emotionalism against people to get the vote. And then they get in the office and they've effed over people. And what they do is they don't fix it. They continue to blame other people for the fallout. Now Trump is the problem because he's bringing in the National Guard. No, he's not. You guys effed over the people by defunding police and all of that. And now the crime is out of control. And now the federal government has to get involved, or the people will just, it'd be uninhabitable. They can't live in an environment like that. And then, you know, the cycle goes, and then the communities go to crap, and it's a negative scenario all around.
And where does this perception come from? I mean, you talked when you were talking about your own story that growing up, you were taught the police are racist, the police hate, you had bad experiences yourself with. Is the perception of the police being racist, does that come from a history of being racist, or present that there are some people who are racist within the police? Is it more of a myth? Like, where do you come down on that?
It's a multitude of things. There are situations where people experience real racism from police officers, right? And then you have the dynamic of white cops patrolling black communities. And there's a dynamic of racism that has occurred previously. And there's also a dynamic of people being racially insensitive. Meaning, if you don't live in a community, you don't know community norms. And therefore conflict happens between people, and there's miscommunication, right? A cop enforced the law, but they don't understand that, like for instance, black people have cultural differences, just like any other culture. And if you don't understand the cultural difference, you're insensitive to the cultural difference, and people will see that as an affront versus seeing it as we're just different. So a cop may be heavy-handed on a scenario that in the community is not as big of a deal, like loud demeanor. Like black people are loud, not all, but it's a thing, right? Black people talk loud. They are more, I don't know, I want to say flamboyant to a certain degree. They're more, I won't say aggressive. It comes across as more aggressive, but black people in the community don't see it as aggressive, right? Loud talking, loud music. Some people are sagging their pants, and in the community is not as a big of a deal. But when you're a cop and you never lived in the community, now you see that, oh, that's a threat. And the miscommunication has happened over time. The cultural dynamic and miscommunication has happened over time. And people pass that trauma down through policing when policing have changed a lot, right? It's no longer police are enforcing segregation laws. But my grandmother still feel the effects of segregation laws. And grandmother passed it down to your dad, and your dad passed it down to your son. But policing have changed. There's no Jim Crow laws anymore. Policing have become a lot more dynamic. There's a lot more accountability. So some of it is coming from a history of racism in part, and a history of a dynamic of racial clash without understanding. And the white man is the enforcer, the black man is on the other side of it. And I think some of those things matriculate down in a way that it shouldn't have. I wish that people would mold with society and have open communication, but it doesn't occur like that. So my people in my community telling me to hate police come from something that I've never experienced, and that's not even real in my time. And I now see the world through a lens of somebody else's trauma that I don't really have a real experience with. So now when I see a cop that pulled me over, I'm looking through the lens of my grandmother, great-grandmother. And I'm like, oh, they're pulling me over because I'm black, right? Because this is what they do. When in reality, that's not what they do anymore. This is not a reality. But I have made it a reality, which creates hate in my heart for cops. And then if it's unchecked, you begin to teach your kids the same scenario. And then all it takes for politicians and the media is to weaponize the emotional experience.
If you're a homeowner in America, you need to listen to this.
The FBI has been warning about a type of real estate fraud on the rise called title theft, or as it's otherwise known, house stealing.
And your equity is the target. Here's how it works. Criminals forge your signature on a single document, use a fake notary stamp, and file it with the county. And just like that, on record, they own your home.
So when is the last time you checked on your home title? If the answer is never, you need to do something about it right now.
That's why we've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can protect your equity and find out today if you're already a victim.
Use our promo code TRIGGER at hometitlelock.com and you'll get a free title history report, plus a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title records, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud occurs, the US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix it.
Title theft can happen to anyone with US property, especially those who own their home outright. Learn more and see if your property has been tampered with. Click the link in the description or go to hometitlelock.com, promo code TRIGGER. That's hometitlelock.com, promo code TRIGGER.
This is the thing I was going to ask you about, man, because I remember I was completely apolitical. I was coming to the US, and it must have been 2014 when Michael Brown was shot.
Yep.
And I was staying with friends of mine who were black. And they were talking about it on social media all the time, on Facebook. I see it every day. So I was like, let me read up on it. So I spent, I think, a whole week. I didn't have that good a job at the time. I had lots of spare time reading the transcript of the grand jury thing, right? And I was like, and I kind of realized, like, I what the media was saying and what actually happened according to all the evidence were two very different things. And then case after case after case. And look, correct, obviously George Floyd was such a huge explosion in our country as well as yours. And to this day, I don't know what happened, right? But what I do know everyone thinks happened, it was a racist incident.
Right.
No one has ever explained to me what the evidence of that is. Now, maybe there is evidence of that. I don't know, but I haven't heard it.
There's no evidence of it. It's that same traumatic experience passed down, the lenses of racism applied, media manipulation for views, clicks, and pushing propaganda. Michael Brown, see, this is how I became very important in the space, because cops can't talk about this stuff, but I could talk about it. So as a cop,
you mean white cops can't?
White cops can't talk about it, which is like the majority of cops. Well, the majority of cops, the majority of the country. When you go to the South, there's way more black cops. I mean, 50% of the Georgia Police Department is black. So, in the South where most black people live, but the majority of the country is white. So as a cop, when you listen to the story and it says, Michael Brown had hands up, don't shoot, and was executed in the middle of the street. The cop walked up to him in a black neighborhood and shot him in the head. Now, the media wants to push the narrative because you know how crazy that sounds? You know how many people are going to be mad, uproar, clicks, watching. They want to see what's going on. They manipulated that. As a cop, you're like, that don't seem reasonable. A white cop in a black neighborhood has a young man with his hands up in front of everybody and walk over and shoots him in the head and executes him. That didn't happen, right? And so a person like me is like, man, let me look into this a little more. But people who are low information, people who are susceptible to media manipulation, they jump hook, line, and sinker. Some of the witnesses on the scene said he had his hands up and he was shot. I said, no, let me look into this real quick. And then when you go to look at it methodically, you go, yeah, he pretty much did a strong arm robbery situation at a store. The cop didn't know it, but he goes off. He's walking in the middle of the street, him and another guy. Cop tell him, please get out the street. The other guy gets off the street. He's on the sidewalk. Michael Brown said he wasn't going to do it. He's 6'5" or 6'3", 300-pound kid. The cop don't know that he's 17, 18. That's like a grown man. And he's defiant. So then as we know the scenario, he tries to take the cop's gun. There was the shot fired. He charges the cop shoots him. Barack Obama and his DOJ did a full investigation, and before the investigation was completed, Barack Obama and his DOJ went to Michael Brown's funeral. Now, as a cop, we know that it didn't happen that way, but why is the president doing this? He's virtue signaling. The DOJ did a conclusive investigation that the police officer acted appropriately and according to policy and was cleared. Not only locally, state, but the federal government. Barack Obama never recanted, never said anything about it. But the images in the minds of black people who has this generational trauma that's been passed down see that Barack Obama went to the funeral of this young black man. God is my witness. You can go to probably 40-50% of black people today and they still think Michael Brown didn't do nothing. They still think he had his hands up. On the news, they said, remember I don't know if you guys remember this, in America, they had a moment of silence where people in the news media had their hands up for Michael Brown. It never happened. And this has happened time and time again. I write it in my book, Beating Black and Blue. I went through every shooting and methodically explained exactly what happened in the manipulation. Eric Garner, who's the guy in New York, I can't breathe. That's where that started. I said, because as a cop, protocol, use of force policy, the force continuum and all this other stuff that as a cop. As soon as I saw it, I said, no, the cop is going to be cleared. This guy had been arrested 47 times already. He was clearly combatant. And they didn't try to kill him. They talked to him, they tried to use soft control, and they escalated the use of force policy, which is, according to the policy, they did everything within policy. This guy happened to be a big guy, out of shape, he had a heart attack and died. They tried to render aid, everything. I'm like, they're gonna be cleared. But the media don't care about that. They won't interview a police officer and say, hey, what you think about this? They run with a narrative to get everybody worked up. That's why I became really popular in 2020. I went from 400,000 subscribers to 1.2 million in 1 month, because I was one of the only people who could have a voice that was the voice of reason in all these police shootings, because I can articulate very clearly the policies that I'm saying in the law, and I put it all together. So that was one of the dynamics that really hurt us, was we didn't have enough people that could have a voice bigger than the media that would at least tell the truth about some of these shootings.
And so what is your perspective on the George Floyd situation? What do you think happened there?
Yeah, I don't think it was race related. There's no evidence of it. Like, you can't just project it as race because it's a white and a black person, right? If you look at the fullness of, well, first of all, let me start with this. Derek Chauvin is a nut. I don't support him at all. I hope he go to jail. He deserved to go to jail. He ruined policing. He dang near ruined policing unilaterally because of his stupidity. And I'm gonna get backlash from the conservatives on this, and I don't give a F. I was a cop and I did the job. You don't sit on a man like that long while he's grimacing and complaining that he's having a heart attack or whatever he's complaining about. We were not trained to do that. In the academy, we're trained to cover your own butt, right? Meaning that if you think the person is faking or not is irrelevant. You have to show a level of concern and at least do your due diligence and making sure that you roll a person in a recovery position, give them the aid that they deserve, even if they lie. I've had people lie 100 times to me. It doesn't matter. We're trained to treat, unless they're a threat, right? Meaning the person said can't breathe, but they got a gun and they're trying to fight. That's a different thing. If a guy is not armed, you have him secured on the ground, his hands behind his back, 2 officers on his legs. We are trained to give him a render aid to this guy in an appropriate manner. I would have never done that. No cop that I know would have ever sat on that man that long and watched him die, and he pisses his pants and he goes unconscious and you still sit on the guy. It was so egregious to me. And it was the microcosm of a bad cop, not a racial encounter. Because if you look at the beginning of the scenario when they first made contact, Chauvin was very nice to George Floyd. He was being nice to him. I think he recognized him because he was a local criminal. And so he was nice to him. He put him in the car. It was nothing really exaggerated that happened until they got to the ground. And so I don't know what made Derek Chauvin act like he did. I don't know if it was fear. I don't know if it was because everybody was yelling at him. He like, screw you guys. I'm gonna just stand on this guy because I can. I don't know what dynamic that was, but it was wrong. But there's no evidence of racial bias. No evidence whatsoever. And in the America we live in, the media and activists have a vested interest to make it racist because there's no money in it not being racist. Think about it. If it was not a racial encounter, it was just a bad cop. He got indicted the next day. He's going to prison. Justice is served. So if it's just a bad cop making a decision like this, there's no George Floyd. There's no worldwide outrage because there's no racial dynamic. So if you are sitting in a boardroom, you want to push the issue that is racist because you're going to get clicks, and he got statues and there's celebrities, and you got a whole industry on George Floyd now because they made it a racial dynamic. There was a scenario, Tony Timpa, I don't know if you heard of that story.
I have.
Was more egregious.
More?
It was. I think Tony Timpa was more egregious than what happened to George Floyd because Tony Timpa was not committing a crime. He had a mental episode and he had called the police so that they can help him. They get there and they have him down on the ground and he's struggling to breathe and he's going unconscious, and he actually goes unconscious, and they mock him and they laugh at him and they go, "Oh, the baby is asleep now." They did all this stuff on body camera. It was way more egregious than George Floyd, in my opinion. And of course, the cops didn't know that he had died. They should have known better. But the stuff that they said about Tony Timpa while he was dead, and the lack of aid that they rendered to him, and he didn't even commit a crime. He asked for help and they killed him. That was more egregious. But because he was white, there is no money and no activism in a white man losing his life that way. And statistical data shows that white unarmed people get killed twice as much as black people. White people get killed twice as much as black people by police. And people will say, well, there's more white people. Well, there's not more patrol saturation in white communities like there are in inner cities where most of the violence occurs. So when you look at the saturation of patrol in inner city communities, white people actually get shot at a higher rate than black people do at the same amount of patrol. And so if the world would know this, we would be a better place. But there is no money in sanity. There's money in hysteria and getting everybody worked up.